Boss Lady Conversations with Monica L.
and Coach Kaya.
Boss ladies are
Vulnerable,
authentic,
love,
hopeful,
abundant.
respected.
Boss ladies are
You.
This Boss Lady Conversations episode contains material that details personal domestic violence experiences and might be difficult to hear or discuss. Please use your discretion. The purpose of this episode is to raise awareness and provide support for those in need. If you or someone you know is in danger or struggling to better understand what a healthy relationship is, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE or text START START to 88788. Thank you for tuning back in to the Boss Lady Conversations podcast, where we share part 2 of Overcoming Unhealthy Relationships with Boss Lady author and motivational speaker Imani Hood-McDonald. We're picking right back up where this inspirational boss lady left off.
Yeah, it is. It was a lot, and I'm grateful for those people. It was hard to be able to express the things that I lived through in my family. One, because of course they love me, right? So we don't want to tell them too much because they might go and do something they don't have no business doing, right? But nevertheless, it was hard for me to digest what happened to me. I didn't even know what domestic violence was. I didn't even know there was a name for what I lived through. I realized that I had went through domestic violence when I was in court one day. I was listening to an advocate for domestic violence speak to attorneys about what to look for in their clients if they're being abused. And the lady was describing my life. I'm like, how does she know what I lived through? Like, this is wild. There's a name for it. And it was like an aha moment. And it was crazy because I didn't know. Growing up, my mom just said, don't take no crap from a man. And I'm like, what does that mean? I didn't know what that meant to apply it to my own life. Because your version of crap may be different from my version of crap, Coach Kaya, right? So you might not let a man just pop up at your house. That's crap to you. Right. I didn't know that the isolation was a start of the abuse. I didn't know that manipulating me was a part of the abuse. I didn't know that that was a whole thing, to the point where even 2 years after leaving him, I still heard his voice in my head before I made a decision, because I felt like he always would tell me that I didn't make good decisions, right? So he would say, you don't make good decisions. And so that stuck with me, unfortunately. And so because he manipulated and played in my head for so long, 2 years later, I still could hear him before I made a decision. You don't make good decisions. So I would question my decision-making because of it. It took me 2 years to get him out of my head.
Imani, thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, as Coach Kaya was reading the stats earlier, unfortunately, many of us have either been in, similar situations or know someone who has. Yeah. And that's why, this conversation is so important. So we want to thank you again for being open and honest. And, 18 years old, I mean, respectfully, you were a baby,
I was a baby.
Yeah. And so
I was a baby.
And then you had babies. And so having that courage, and we know about the manipulation and the mind games that people can play, and that impact, and so again, thank you for sharing your story and also sharing it in this book that's going to help so many other women. And so for that, I commend you, because a lot of us do go in silent, or we blame ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're like, oh,
some of that happened.
Me, right? Because I did this, or I didn't do this. And it's like, no, it's that person. It's not you, It's not you. It's how they are. It's their demons. It's not yours. Yeah.
Oh, and I'll tell you that for a long time, I didn't understand it because attacked me verbally, right, and physically. And so I didn't understand where did it come from. And so as I began to want to leave and heal, he had the insecurities, not me, but he was projecting onto me, right? And so that's what I've learned coming out of the situation and healing and the situation. So not necessarily wasn't my fault, right? But it was him projecting how he felt on the inside about me. He would say to me like, oh, you're going to get a job in a car and leave me. Because at one point I wasn't working. From the time my son was born until he was 2, I didn't work. So it was kind of me being codependent on him financially. So it was like, oh, when you get a job, I didn't know that was the power though, right? I didn't know that was the power, Coach Kaya. And so that was the thing, like, oh, if she's not working, then she can't go anywhere without me. She can't spend any money without me, right? And so that was the power, that was the leverage. So he kept saying like, oh, you're going to get a job, you're going to get a car, and you're going to leave me. And I'm like, why would I leave? And so me being oblivious, because I didn't have a clue, like, what is he talking about? I love him. Why would I leave you? But he knew he was insecure. And so the power gave him security that he couldn't give himself emotionally. And so because of that, now it's always Imani for everything. Imani for, let me use you for this. Let me blame you for this. Everything is Imani, right? Because now it's to throw you off. That's what it's designed for. The conversation of blame is to throw you off and make you feel crazy. Because at one point I did. I'm like, I believed everything he said. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, why do I feel like I'm literally running around with my head cut off? Because he was manipulating me. If you deflect, then my truth is no longer my truth. It's a lie. So now I'm believing my own truth to be a lie because you dancing literally, you running circles around me. And so it became a question of me being confused all the time, for sure. That was abusive. Yeah.
Imani, do you still struggle with some of that today? Like, do you find that you have to still manage things that kind of pop up and pop in and try to throw you off a little bit?
That's a great question, actually. Not necessarily is it a distraction. I get thrown off by being overwhelmed in different aspects of my life, still learning how to manage me emotionally and my children. And so as things change and fluctuate in our lives, I have now an 18-year-old son in college, and then I have 2 teenage daughters. So our life has changed yet again, right? Because teenagers are different from babies.
Right.
So the change in that, the change in getting remarried, there is a change in that. So being overwhelmed sometimes does throw me off. What I've learned to do is to reflect and be quiet. And so what helps me to refocus, also I'm still in therapy, right? But to refocus and to be quiet, meditation, one of my favorite things to do, and my beach. I love going to the beach and walking and clear my thoughts. So yes, I struggle with being overwhelmed, but not that way. Because when I tell you my brain came out of a fog after that situation, I was like in a fog and I thought something was really wrong with me. At some point, my grandmother was like, Imani, you would forget everything. She said you would forget your head if it wasn't connected to your shoulders. That's what she would say to me. Because when I left him, I moved with my grandmother for 2 years.
Okay.
And so I had to figure out why such fog. And it was really depression. And I didn't know that to identify it, right? And so I was completely depressed, not figuring, just trying to figure out my new life. Now I'm living with my grandmother. So that's a different situation. And now I have to raise my children. And then we started going back and forth to court for custody issues. So just trying to survive this. So I survived that, right? That was tough to survive, and to come out of it was still tough. So trying to navigate through custody, and this is the way I want to raise them, and now you don't want to raise them this way. And it was very, what did they call it? Because we couldn't even be in the same room at one point. It was very high,
contentious,
intense, very, very intense situation to be in. My ex-husband and I were not allowed to be in the same room because how intense our relationship was. We were not able to communicate at all. Well, yeah.
With that, Imani, can you speak just a little bit about co-parenting? Because I'm sure for our listeners, including me, I'm hearing you say domestic violence, and then you go through court, and then you're co-parenting. Like, I just don't understand. So can you help me understand why they would allow for him to have custody in light of everything you've been through?
Sure. So initially with domestic violence, I've had 5 restraining orders against my ex-husband. And so what that did was it automatically threw us in court. So at the time of the restraining order, it's like, oh, you have kids in common? Okay. So now we have to address custody and visitation. So the immediate danger was not for the children. The immediate danger was for me. So the court automatically gave him 50% custody. I had to prove, and it took me 10 years to get full custody of my children. Kid you not. I had to prove his irrational behavior also affected my children. But in order to prove that, you have to document everything in black and white. Do not go to court, and this is just a tidbit, do not go to court yelling and spewing out what he did and what you did, because the judge will not listen to you. You'll just be another couple that doesn't get along. You have to write everything out. You have to document this date when my child came home, this is what happened. And you literally log it. And so when you go to court, you make a copy and you give it to the judge. If you don't go for the judge, you can file it with the court and the judge will get it. So that's how I won custody of my children. I documented, I took pictures when they would come back home. If he did anything to my kids that I could show physical proof of, I took pictures and I made copies of that to show the judge. That's how I was able to get full custody of my children. But the judge will automatically grant 50% custody between two parents.
And I just want to repeat that for the people. You said it took 10 years.
10 years. It took me 10 years to fight because initially I was emotional. So I'm thinking if I just go to court and just tell them everything, they don't want to hear your words. They want to see what you're talking about. That's how the judicial system works. And so 10 years of hell, and I finally got full custody of my children.
Wow, Imani. I mean, your story, I'm just so glad that you are writing about it, because I think so many women just go in silent and, like you say, don't want to put it out there because then it's putting a spotlight on you, the children. And so, if everyone is in silent, then we have these stats, knowing a way out, and then, embarrassment and shame and all these things that we shouldn't.
Yes.
Because it's someone doing it to us. So just to turn the corners a little bit. So as a boss lady, you wear multiple hats, clearly. Mother of 3, wife, self-published author, and behavioral interventionist. So please share, why did you decide to go the self-publishing route and do your own distribution? Like you got that much time in a day. So why did you decide just to take on all of this?
To be really, really honest with you, I didn't know that there was a different way, right? I knew about Amazon, right? But initially when I started this process, the way it was presented to me was to self-publish. A friend of mine, my old coworker, we were talking one day when we were working years ago, and he said, "Imani, you have a story." I was like, "Nobody wants to listen to our story. What are you talking about?" Right? And he's like, "No, you have a story. You should tell it." And I have a publishing company. Well, long story short, he introduced me to an editor, and he was able to encourage me over a 1-year span to finish my story. He called me one day out the blue, like 2 years later after we had a conversation. He's like, "So what you doing, girl?" I said, "Actually, I'm writing." He said, "I told you, call me when you're done." And so I called him when I was done, and he was like, "Let's go." So he introduced me to the editor. She looked over, she said, "Imani, you put it together so well. I don't have to do much." I mean, I was like, only God could have did that because I don't write. So she's like, "Oh, you put it together so well. I just have to do a few grammar and, we'll send it to printing." And so I was like, "Send it to print?" She was like, "Yeah, we're going to send it to print." And so she hooked me up with this company, and the rest was history. And so I didn't really get an opportunity to say, "Hey, I want to put it on Amazon," because the ball was kind of already moving, and I just kept going in that direction. But I'm grateful that I did do it that way, so I can kind of see the step and get the knowledge. And so when I do, get a chance to put it on Amazon, I'll know exactly what's going on behind the scenes.
Very smart. Very smart.
And Imani, you did something so special, is that you made your children a part of this publishing experience, and your son did the cover. And how did this impact him and your other children as well? Like that mommy's doing this, mommy's telling, it's our story. It's not just your story.
Yeah, it is. So my son, he's super stoked. He actually did the cover and like 4 pictures in the book. So the drawings that are in the book, my son did those as well. He was super excited to be a part of this project. He often claims it as his book. I said, "No, sir. No, sir. It's not your book. It's mom's book, right? You just help do some illustrations." And my daughters are like, "So you're going to pay me, right? Because you put my picture in there." So I have some characters in my life for sure.
You got some bosses. You got some bosses.
Oh yes, I definitely have some bosses. They think they're my boss, but we're not gonna talk. That's a different story, okay? I will tell you that my daughters are super proud of me. My son is super proud of me, and they often help me at book events. So I bring my kids, and we wear matching T-shirts, and we work. And the whole goal is to teach them that you can be your own boss, right? And we can be an entrepreneur, and for them to take the steps necessary for them to do the things that they love to do. And so it's just to show them and to model what that looks like for them.
Amazing. I mean, to take your story, to flip it, to now make a business, to show your children that they can do it. So already they know that another revenue stream, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Before even graduating from college, because again, you showed them by example. So you're creating your own legacy. And then they do have a story to tell because they were a part of this, you know?
Yes.
And so I could just see this being a series. I could see this being a movie. I could just see it growing in so many ways.
Take that.
And then you're an exceptional speaker. So I am just excited about, you know, the future opportunities that you're going to have. So with that being said, what are 3 strategies that you would offer to our listeners about self-publishing? 3 strategies.
I would say keep going, stay motivated, be consistent, and don't give up. And I would also say find a really great editor. If you want to self-publish, that's awesome. I would say get a great editor starting, because for me personally, I had no idea what I was doing, right? So they can help you format it and put it together and make sure it makes sense as you go and as you keep reading it.
I love it. And how can our listeners purchase your books?
They can purchase my book. Wait, listen. Wait.
Yeah.
Bam!
Yay! And we're going to include it too. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. They can purchase it if they send me a message on Instagram. My kids tell me don't say IG, right? Instagram at just Imani, JUSIMANI, or Facebook. They can hit me up on Messenger and they can look for me at Imani McDonald.
Excellent.
Amazing. Wait a minute. So the kids say don't say IG?
Girl, they tell me don't say IG, Mom. Don't say IG. That sounds weird. Hey, listen, I don't know.
All right. Let us know. Okay.
Yeah, because we say it. We
right. Listen, I feel like I'm old, and I don't even, I'm not old, but they make me feel really, girl, they make me feel so old. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. These kids make me feel, oh, Mom, don't say IG or Insta. Don't say Insta. Just say Instagram. Oh, my apologies, okay?
Tell them thank you. Thank you. We will also take that tip. Can you hold the book up again?
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The angel, the wings. Yes, you.
Your son did a wonderful job.
He did.
And so the interesting part about this entire angel, because I didn't even realize that that's what that was. I gave my son something to read from my book. And I said, I want you to read this. And then after you read it, then I want you to draw something after you read it. And he was like, okay, Mom. And so that's where she came from.
Come on now.
That's where she came from. And so that's kind of what I did throughout the book. And after he drew it, I'm going to give you this. So after he drew it, if you pay attention to her, she's descending. And I was like, all right, Jesus, okay, I'm looking, I'm listening, right? She's flying. She's not stationary. She's elevated. I'll take that. That's what I tell God. I'll take the elevation. Yes, for sure. After the healing comes the elevation.
Come on now.
And so I'm good with that. I'm definitely good with that. And so I told my son, thank you very much. And even in the book, there's a poem about a Black boy not being in a box. And I said, son, I want you to read this. And then I want you to draw it. And what he drew was a Black boy coming out of the box. And so the poem was really to my son. That's why I wrote the poem, because he was never meant to be put in a box. You can be who you want to be. You don't have to be what the world tells you that you are. And so that was what that was for, because I feel like especially our Black boys, they're crucified. Every day I work in the public school system. They're often called bad, right? Just for being curious. They're often put down because they don't read like the other boys. They're not as interested in academics. And so my son was one of those kids. And so we all learn differently. But that doesn't mean he was slow. That didn't mean he had ADHD. That didn't mean, I can go on and on, but that didn't mean that the box that they put you in, you were supposed to stay. I don't believe that. And so before my son would get out the car every morning, he would have to recite to me. And I would say, you're the head and not the tail. You are above and not beneath. You can do all things through Christ that strengthens you. You are a mighty man of valor. And he would have to say that before he got out the car. I didn't care what kind of day he was going to have. I needed to speak life into him. And today he's a reflection of that life that I spoke into him.
Yes. Go, Imani. Let the boss ladies know. Yes. Yes. Okay, boss mom.
Not only did you take your power back, you took control of your destiny and your children's destiny, because it could have went in so many other directions. Ma'am.
And I refuse for it to go in any of those directions. I refuse to. And my son will tell you, I posted on Facebook and I said, my son told me one day, he said, Mom, I've never seen you not motivated. And I was in awe because my son saw me. Because at one point in my life, I wasn't motivated. I was depressed. I felt defeated. And so I didn't know what to do anymore, right? And so for my son to see that his mother was driven and that she can make things happen because she's consistent, that meant everything to me. That meant everything to me. That's what this is about. This is about being completely determined on trying to overcome our challenges, because they're gonna come. And so I put overcoming because it's always in motion. There's always things that are gonna come. I didn't put overcame because I didn't just overcame. I'm still overcoming every day. There's obstacles to overcome. And so that is truly my testimony. How I overcome those things. Am I gonna allow them to knock me down and defeat me? Or am I gonna take my cries and my tears and keep it pushing? And so I teach my children, we don't fold. We don't fold. We keep going. We do not fold. We can cry, right? It can feel bad, but what do we do next? This is how we cope with the things that are constantly happening to us. Constantly, we're in motion and things are constantly happening. Okay, so they're gonna keep happening. So when you go through this, okay, so how do we figure out? How can we be happy in this moment? How can we still have joy in this moment? And so those are the things that I teach my children, to be vigilant. Your happiness and your joy is your own responsibility, not anyone else's.
All right, boss lady. So many mic drops, so many gems.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, such a blessing. You are a blessing, Imani.
Oh, thank you so much.
Truly a blessing and so wise.
Oh, thank you.
You are very wise, very, very wise. Yes. So Imani, we manifest positivity because, it's Boss Lady Conversations. So where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Lord, I hope not working. No, look.
We ain't mad about it. We ain't mad about it. Go ahead with it.
I see myself on many platforms, at many speaking engagements, promoting this book and getting a conversation of mental wellness. Let's start there in our community, right? Black and brown people, we don't talk about things. We like to sweep them underneath the rug. Giving people the permission to have grace on themselves, because I struggle with grace, right? And I did suffer in silence for years. I didn't know how to articulate my words, but I'm praying, and my prayer, my hope is that someone will see me and say, if she can do it, I can do it. Even if it's just journaling, right? Getting it off of them and talking about it with the therapist. You don't have to be in the forefront, right? But definitely getting some help that you need to help you be your best self. I'm hoping that we can have conversations about therapy, because there are plenty of Black therapists out there. So you don't necessarily have to feel like you have to get on the couch with somebody that you can't relate to, right? I have a Black therapist, right? My son has a Black therapist. And so we can even do it that way, but just more conversations about mental wellness and trying to be our best selves. And we have grown up as a people to just be strong. Well, what does that look like? What does that look? Does strong mean I just deny everything so I can keep living, or is strong dealing with things that have hurt me? And so my prayer, my hope is in 5 years that I can open the door for just more conversations, even in schools, talking to the young kids about having healthy relationships, because, we fall in love in high school. We think this is awesome until it's not.
There it is.
Yeah. My first experience directly with domestic violence was a good childhood friend who was in a very toxic relationship. I saw him physically beat her right in front of me. She was 14, I was 15. And, and it happened so fast. People like, what did you do? I was in shock.
Nothing. Yeah.
I was in shock, because that was not something that I knew was taking place in their relationship. And I know that had an impact on her, and it had an impact on me. In my own mind, people can get these hands before they get a hug, because it was like, I don't know, and you don't stereotype, but you're like, if that's how somebody show love, because you don't know where to put it. And so you're like, all you know is what you saw. And you're like, what do I do with this?
It takes the trust away.
It does. It does. And it makes you feel like you're just acceptable to anyone who wants to come by and do this to you. Now, as a person in their 40s, is like, yeah, we should all have some therapy immediately. And like you say, finding your words, it's not the way things go, no charges were pressed. It just was like, oh, that happened. Well, it won't happen again. And we
rationalize it. We start rationalizing it.
Exactly.
Instantly.
Yeah.
And you can't rationalize it. And that's something that this is another reason why this book is so important, because we cannot rationalize abuse, but we do it in our community because it makes us feel better about the situation, but it doesn't take the trauma away.
It doesn't.
You cannot rationalize any form of abuse. But what we do is, and then we program our minds to think that this is normal. And to be honest with you, being in the situation, it became my normal, because I did rationalize it, because he was irrational most of the time. So that became normal. Him flying up at the handle was normal. So why would I be scared? Sometimes I didn't have enough sense to be scared because this was normal.
Right.
Yeah.
This was just a regular occurrence. Like, to somebody else, it would have been startling, but you had already been conditioned to live that way.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, you guys are similar in age too, right?
Oh, yes. He's 2 years older than me.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people think like, oh, are we talking about someone who's significantly older?
Not at all.
Right.
Yeah. And that was the same in the relationship that I experienced as well. He was only a year older, so we're not talking about someone who's significantly older where you would think like, oh, well, you shouldn't have been dating someone now, but again, not blaming the victim. Yeah.
Because to be honest with you, women can be domestic. Women can abuse a man, right? And so it has nothing to do with size. It has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with age. It's a complex, right? It's their emotional distress pushing and projecting on someone else. And I learned that most of the time it's someone whose power was already taken. So they want to take your power. And so it's reciprocated, right? So somewhere down the line in their childhood, in their lifetime, someone took their power. So this is how they regain their power, by abusing another person. It could be a kid, it could be a spouse, but you feel like this person, I can overpower them. And so that makes me feel incredibly good. But hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah.
And so when you're hurt, you're going to automatically hurt someone else. That's why it's imperative that we get whole and that we heal, so that we do not keep hurting. And so I had to heal for my children so I wouldn't harm them. That was imperative for me, that I did not want them to grow up in another toxic relationship. And do we have bumps and bruises along the way? Of course we do. And so we live through those moments and we forgive, and I apologize and they apologize. And that's what I teach my children, forgiveness. I don't teach them that we sweep things under the rug like it didn't happen because I'm your mama and you my kid. I don't teach my kids that. I apologize to them. We talk about it in a respectful way so that we can move past whatever issue that we're going through.
Wow. Yeah. So Imani, what boss ladies inspire you to stand in your greatness?
So another reason why I wear this shirt, so y'all can see that right there.
Okay.
That's my mother's signature. So my mother is the epitome of everything I ever wanted to be. She is no longer here. She died of breast cancer the same year my son was born. So my daughters never got a chance to meet their grandmother, but my mother, what she embodied was strength. What she embodied was courage. My mother joined the military after having 3 kids, divorced from 2 marriages. Listen to me. Joined the military, and because she wanted her children to have better. My mother was the strongest I've ever seen her was when she was sick with her cancer, and she didn't allow it to bother her. She kept going and kept going and kept moving, and she was relentless. And that's how my mother was. And so I have, and I in my book I talk about this, but I tell people all the time, I feel like she played me though, because she made everything seem so easy. Raising 3 kids was like no sweat off her brow. She kept pushing through the poverty and not having everything that she wanted. She kept pushing. I'm like, what is this lady robbed me, because she made this thing so easy. And it wasn't easy. It's still not easy, right? But she didn't always get a chance to have grace with self. And so she wasn't gentle with herself. So she held herself to a standard that I refuse to hold myself to, that I'm perfect and that I can't be vulnerable, right? And so I took that from her, but not in a negative way, but in a positive way. My mother never cried. She never cried. When she got happy at church, she cried, right? But she never cried, and I took that on, and I did something with it. I cry in front of my children because I want them to understand being vulnerable is a good thing, right? There's strength in being vulnerable. And so because of her being who she was to me, I took that and I just flipped it. I said, oh no, we're going to be vulnerable. We're going to cry, because I struggled with that for a long time. Like, my mom didn't cry. What's wrong with me? Why am I being a punk? That's how I would talk to myself. And so these last couple of years, for sure, I've learned to be graceful with myself. I've learned to have mercy, on myself, because we're so used to just doing, especially as women. We're just used to doing. We fix everything, right? And I often tell people, my kids think I'm Jesus. I turn water into wine. But we're so used to doing and not taking care of ourselves. And that's another component to this book, pouring back into me, so I'm not pouring from an empty cup.
Ooh, you just gonna keep dropping gems of money? You just gonna, okay. All right.
Go get the book.
Get the book.
More gems in the book.
Right, get the book.
Get the book. Get the book. And with that, like, how do our Boss Lady listeners stay in contact with you for all these gems? What's the best way?
I believe Instagram is the best way. I monitor it daily. So definitely, again, at just Imani, JUSIMANI. Please hit me up on Instagram.
Sounds good.
Wonderful. And you can is that the best place for them to reach you, to book some speaking? So you can book some speaking engagements and share.
Sure. Instagram is definitely, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Boss Ladies, we know you want to hear more, but what you need to do is pick up that book, pick up that phenomenal book.
Please. Yes, please.
Book Imani for some speaking engagements so she can come to your group, to your town, to your community, and share this amazing testimony and what happened after and what's happening today. And in the meantime, we want to recap some of the many, 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 many gems that Imani Hood-McDonald shared with us today. Emotional codependency can lead to isolation and manipulation. These are red flags. One of Imani's tips for those who may be experiencing domestic violence is run. It's very much a matter of life or death. Once your life is gone, it's gone. Your children often reflect what's going on at home, so staying for the children can often lead to them displaying negative behaviors. At that point, safety is all that matters. Therapy is a useful tool for processing trauma and refocusing on you and what you need to do for you. It's better to be transparent when you are in an unhealthy relationship. You never know who will help you. We have to heal so that we don't unintentionally hurt others. After the healing comes the elevation. We may bend, but we never, ever, ever fold. If you want to self-publish, keep going. Don't give up, and get a great editor. Thank you, Imani, for these amazing, amazing gems. And we know that the Boss Ladies are going to listen to this episode and hear even more gems, because if I was to write all the gems that we heard today, I would have gone on for another hour or more.
Thank you. I'm humble for sure.
If you or a loved one are experiencing domestic violence or would like some support with cultivating healthy relationships, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233 for confidential assistance from trained advocates. And advocates are also available to speak with you 24/7. You can also contact the National Center for Victims of Crime at 1-855-4-VICTIM. That's 1-855-484-2846.
Woo! And we really hope you enjoy connecting with boss lady Imani Hood-McDonald and learning about healing, entrepreneurship, and bossing up. Thank you again, Imani. And please don't forget to purchase our journal, Boss Lady Manifesto Journal, Commitments Designed to Keep You and the Little Queen Inside You Bossed Up, available on Amazon. Thank you, Imani.
Thank you, Imani. We appreciate you so much.
If you haven't already done so, please follow us on Spotify and iHeartRadio.
And you'll be notified whenever we post a new Boss Lady Conversation episode.
You are who you say you are.
You're destined for great things. Your life matters each and every day.
Now go get your blessings, boss ladies.